And we are live with our 85th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm going to mess it up. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey everybody! Welcome back to the show. We're running a little bit late today, but that's
my fault.
It's all Ken's fault, so just blame him. If you are catching this later, that's fine. It'll be up on all of the channels. But I did mess up on pushing things out to podcasts and Google Play last week. So yeah, you may have like 3 or 4 episodes queued up if you are listening to us that way. This week we're joined by David Lindner. We'll get into introductions with Dave shortly. We're happy to have him. He's even wearing our Magic Time shirt, so it is definitely Magic Time today.
Yeah.
As far as announcements go, I'm headed to B-Side San Francisco this week. I'll be there Saturday morning for the Secure Code Review workshop, and I don't know what's going to happen with RSA now that everyone's backing out because of COVID-19, right? Because of the coronavirus that's going around. But so I may be around there somewhere, wearing a mask or something like that. Anyway, if you're going to be in San Francisco, let me know if you want to get together. And yeah, other than that, I think we can just dive straight into it, Ken. I did see yesterday that Portswigger posted his top 10 web hacking techniques of 2019. So they finished the polling there, and he posted his top 10. If you haven't seen those, go check them out. I think we'll start doing some sort of a walkthrough on each of them like we did last year. There's some really interesting techniques in there and stuff that I haven't dug into that deeply. He did pull his name out of contention. James Kettle did, or his, request smuggling stuff, because it by far won, but he didn't feel right about adding that to his list of top 10 when he was the one. So we can talk about that as well. But there's some really interesting thing. I mean, that one's an interesting balance of very offensive techniques for finding cool bugs, like bug bounty people, and also kind of, hey, these are general things that you should be looking at. So, I mean, it's a good kind of alternative to the OWASP top 10, right? As far as what's really out there and what people are finding. But.
Yep. No, it's pretty interesting. They've got, so we have some of the like cache stuff sort of still there. Abusing metaprogramming for unauthentic. I like it. So yeah, because metaprogramming, we've talked about it on this podcast before. But it's just code that writes code. It's very, very prevalent in the Ruby landscape. But
wait, Ruby? What's that? Is that a language?
Who uses them?
People who do metaprogramming.
Oh, okay.
But and also, you can write it in, it's called reflection in other languages. Python has it. So there is the ability to do metaprogramming where code's created on the fly based off of dynamic variables, but you just don't see it all the time sort of done. So you see a lot of, this is to cut down on repetitive functionalities that only do something slightly different each time. Anyway, so or there's other reasons too. There's lots of reasons, but anyways, it's one of them. But it's pretty cool because you see several. So between the metaprogramming on an unauthenticated RC for number 4, and then number 7 exploring CI services, it's once again, CI services and because they use Jenkins on number 4 as Yeah. So as an example, yeah. So once again, you see this year after year. It's just coming. It hasn't gone away. So
no. And
at this point,
he does talk about that.
For at least 7 years, we've been talking about it. So just putting that out there. For at least 7 years, this has been. I know myself.
No, it's been fine.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, we'll get into that in a later episode, I'm sure. But if you haven't perused them yet, we're posting the link up there. It's become familiar with them, because even if you're on the defensive side, if you're protecting the site, are trying to code against some of these things, it's very it's useful to know about what's actually effective and where people are getting paid, right? Where the bug bounty guys are actually finding these exploits. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything else. Ken, did you have outside of come sign up for our course for Black Hat, right?
Yes, please sign up for our course at Black Hat because you will love it and you will learn how to do code reviews in a very efficient manner. But not only that, you'll walk away with the feeling of having done a thorough review and being able to show others that you have completed a thorough review. That's the main thing I think that I like to impress upon people as a value takeaway. Is you can feel confident that you did a good review and you can show your work and other people guys can read it.
Do you focus on a specific language in that course, just or is it just a general?
No, it's just a general. Like the whole idea is we didn't want to make it language or framework specific. So we've got examples in, like we've written apps in Node, Python, or Django, Ruby.
Net.
We've got .NET and Java ones that we'll use as examples. But the whole idea is you should be able to apply the framework to any language as long as you get the basics down of that language. So
we actually make you bounce around a lot that the first day between make you bounce between languages and frameworks just to take the concept and then apply the concepts to demonstrate and make you feel comfortable that you can do this in even a language and framework you're not familiar with.
Yep. Yeah, we want you uncomfortable because that's that's our life. Right?
Who's your target audience? Would you say?
I'm glad you asked. I would say if you're a developer that has any sort of knowledge of security, you can definitely go through this course. Obviously, internal teams, consultants. Probably the only people we recommend that don't come to the course are people that have never done AppSec before. Or have never, if you don't know SQL, if you've never heard of SQL injection or remote code execution or XSS or something, you're probably this is probably not something you're ready for yet. But everyone else,
it's people that want to actually conduct a secure code review. I mean, most of the people that we've had in there have been consultants or at least developers that are working for an organization that are diving in. But like in the prereqs, we talk about, hey, you've got to know what the OWASP top 10 are, right? We're not teaching you what cross-site scripting is, and we're going to refer to cross-site scripting and input validation and, so it's more of an intermediate course, right? Somebody that's got background in application security. So,
cool.
Let's dig into David Lindner's background.
Yes.
We've introduced you. We've talked about your background a little bit before on this show. To catch those who are not familiar with the great David Lindner, as I like to refer to him, if you're not familiar with the great David Lindner, he is currently the director of application security at Contrast Security. And if you're not familiar with Contrast Security, you should get familiar. Contrast Security came about from, I want to say it was Jeff Williams and Dave Wickers, right? Or Wickers, sorry.
And Arshan Dabirsiagi.
There you go. And so that was initially they had formed AppSec as a consulting company. They split it off or they created an entirely new company, a product security company, focused primarily, correct me if I'm wrong, on runtime application security program. Is that?
So it was first IAST, so the interactive application security testing, and RASP was kind of an afterthought, if you will.
Okay. Well, clearly I'm learning today as well as the listeners, which we're going to get into that technology because it comes up, but we don't get to usually talk to somebody with an insight like David Lindner has. Seth, David, and myself all work together at the consulting company we don't mention. And we had a great time. We worked alongside together. Very much enjoyed working with David Lindner. And let's see, anything else? I mean, if you don't know, David Lindner has spoken a whole lot. I really enjoyed his. I think I mentioned this on the last podcast. I really enjoyed your Locomoco Sec talk. If I didn't, sorry. But and again, Locomoco Sec is a security conference for you, Seth, in Hawaii.
Really?
In case you didn't know.
In case I didn't know. Thanks.
And David is also a really good golfer. He hails from Iowa.
Iowa.
And he's the reason that voting fails in Iowa.
Yeah.
What did you do?
I wrote that app overnight with my 14-year-old. So
well, that's what it looked like, right? That's where it came about. Sounds about right.
Yeah. Well, I know Kevin Cody and I believe you did too, David. Like dug into that code a bit, right? When they
released the APK code or the APK. We reversed it a little bit, and I mean it was your basic first React Native app.
Yep.
Not much to it. They're using the traditional analytics engines, which seemed weird for a voting app. They had a lot of like Google API keys and such like that. Nothing like crazy egregious, but things they could have done better. And if given more time and utilizing anyone with any sort of security background, it probably would have been done differently.
Well, I mean, from what I saw of it as well, like you said, it was a first pass of a React Native application, right? And I'm like, really? Did you not? I know they didn't test it, right? Like whatever that Shadow IO org or whatever it was that put it together, they weren't a development org or development shop, and you could tell, right? Like there was not a lot of testing that went on with it. They're referring to development backend APIs, and it just felt very amateurish, right? So. I mean, I don't know what you expect to get out of an organization when you pick it up and try to push something through that quickly. But you would think with the amount of money that's involved in campaigns and, the DNC and other things that they'd probably have at least a little bit of testing.
Yeah. I mean, after a debate, they're like, oh, so-and-so just got $10 million of donations and they spent $60,000 on a mobile app. Probably could have.
Yeah. You kind of get what you there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, $60,000 is not a lot on a mobile app.
No, it's not.
Yeah. That might sound like a lot, but and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you, was it you guys that were saying that it looked like just like a straight up template? Like it looked like a templated app that someone just sort of built on top of? Or was that
it's like they pulled up the React Native example app and just started building on top of that. I mean, it was pretty vanilla.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, if we know anything, it's that Stack Overflow and templates. That's the way that we code, so it should be good. Right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So that brings us to another point, right? Did you see the MIT release on the Votes app? The other one?
Oh, what state was that from? Was it Virginia? No, it wasn't Virginia.
Yeah, West Virginia. It was used in West Virginia one, but it's supposed to be deployed in multiple other states for people that are like out-of-state voters or whatever it is, right? Here, let me post. I'm pushing a link.
Yeah, I had started reading through that. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, but that one was used for actual voting and not just like this caucus thing, right?
Yeah.
Which brings in a whole other realm of potential threat vectors and, validation of people and all that fun stuff that they didn't necessarily need for the caucus app.
Yeah, I don't know. That one is a little bit more interesting because they are using back-end blockchain, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we do apparently. But I mean, it was like anything, right? Like they found that remote access into the device, you could actually change the vote, right? And I'm like, yeah, if you can get remote access into the device, or local access, right? Like all bets are off at that point for any mobile application. Right? You and I both know that. We've dealt with enough of those. So it didn't feel like it was overly shocking, but there was stuff that they could do to prevent them from happening. I mean, if you think about real use of the blockchain and how that should work, it just felt like it was a little bit immature, but not as bad as the Iowa app. So.
No, they put a little thought behind it, at least, right?
A little, yeah.
Very little. It's rude.
Yeah, I don't know how soon we'll get to a point where I'd be comfortable with voting on a mobile device. It's probably.
Yeah, honestly, what would it take?
It's inevitable, right? And we probably should go that route. I think it would get a lot more people to vote. I mean, you look at the number of mobile devices there are in the world; it's more than there are people. Yeah. But then that doesn't mean there's a one-to-one mapping to people, right? Like some people have, like me, I have how many because of testing and whatever else. Which brings in the question: well, can I vote now as me and Seth because I have multiple mobile devices? How do they verify who Seth is, right? That's the stuff that I would kind of lose sleep over, right? Yeah. We have problems with people filing taxes today. Like, oh, someone just has already filed because they knew your 9-digit social security number. So how do we protect a voting app if we can't even protect filing taxes? Right? Like it's inevitable, but I hope they take more time to really figure this out and lock it down. I mean, I'm more comfortable with it today and the thought of it than I would have been, say, 10 years ago, or when the first iPhone or Androids came out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But they're also going to be using APIs, and we know what that means. And that's a scary proposition.
Yeah, I don't know. I go back and forth on it because the convenience is a whole different bag of worms, right? Like we have so many people that don't, especially in the younger generations, right? They talk about how 18 to 29-year-olds, like only like 20% of them vote, right? And it's partially because hey, I have to go wait in line or I have to go do something else. I have to fill out an actual paper ballot and send it in, right? Like there's all these kind of barriers to entry. Whereas if there was an app on their phone, you'd probably see those rates increase. But then again, back to the parties, they're not want that to happen, right? Depending on the demographic that they are, whether that's Democrat or Republican or whoever, right? That it just feels like it is inevitable. You're right. And it's coming, and there are ways to secure it. We know that there are. I know some of the most recent, hey, you've got people that are deployed that are in the military, and they have to vote from wherever that they happen to be deployed. Some of the ways that they've done that in the past, like we're talking email, right? They've basically sent an email and to I'm like, where's the verification there? Well, they had the PDF, right? They filled out the PDF and sent it back, and you're like, oh, and you counted that, right? Like, I'm okay. I guess that's good, but how do you verify that email is the again? There's no.
Maybe we should bring back the black phone. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, right? Like, there's, I don't know, identity verification, right, is a huge problem when it comes to voting. Actual secure identity. Yeah. And I know people are working on it, right? And I know that the new passports, the new real the IDs and things like that. Eventually, you should be able to use something like that to verify a person, but I don't know how we do that securely right now.
Aren't there some states that are allowing you to basically use your phone to show your driver's license? I know they do for things like your car insurance and stuff like that. But I thought maybe with this new ID or whatever those things are called, that doesn't work anymore. But they're definitely expanding when it comes to things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to roll some of that into the mobile devices, like the secure enclave,
No.
But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So we'll see. So you'll sign up for all of that. Got it. You'll be the tester on it. Yeah.
I mean, sure, as long as I can vote for you too. I mean, I'm going to vote for Seth Law in every state. I mean, that's fine.
See what happens.
Yeah. Why not?
No, why not? Let's go for it. Let's go for it. Sweet.
I'll even pick different candidates in every state. They'd never know, right?
Mm-hmm. That's good.
One of our listeners said there are options to cast your vote before you visiting a voting center on a mobile device or computer to generate a QR code that you get that QR code scanned when you visit in person, it looks like. And then you verify your options and then you turn it in. So that's, I mean, I do think you need like physical I don't know. I feel like, well, and regardless of whether, there needs to be a physical presence or not. But although that's a limiting factor, and as software security practitioners, we're supposed to believe that it can be secured to the point where we could do this. But having said that, and having contracted for the government, I don't think they have their shit together enough to have technology that is foolproof. I mean,
what would make you say that? We just spent $60,000 on a really shitty mobile app for the Iowa caucus.
Yeah, I know. Why am I so bleak? No, I mean, if you've ever worked around software security in like a government contracting sense, or as a GS or whatever, like in the government space, I'm not trying to put them down. The problem is not that there's a lack of intelligence or something like that. That's not what I'm saying. Have you ever had to deal with that? You know that contractually, like just the way the contracts are set up, how they procure work, how I believe it's OPM goes through the process of like getting contractors. Basically, it's like a lowest bid thing always. Almost always. And you have all these different, so like, let's say you want to have a mobile app company who contracts to build a mobile app. Well, they're going to have to hook into certain systems. And then, so that requires input and like having checklists done on all these other departments. And it becomes this whole, like, just forget about the technical aspects of it. Just from like a bureaucratic and procurement standpoint, it becomes a very difficult thing for them to do. But like, I mean, that's just from government contracting that I say that. I don't know how, like, I have no idea about like how the voting app software is even procured. So I just don't have a lot of faith in that whole process just because of our, yeah.
I mean, it's friends and family, right? I mean, let's just be real.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the problem is it's state by state as well. So right. Each state gets to determine, how they tabulate votes, and whoever's in control in that state is the one that goes out and picks the vendor. But again, right. So you're not dealing with as big a budget in Iowa or Utah as you are in California, right? Yeah. You just don't have the same revenue to handle that. So I mean,
Iowa's barely a state.
Do
people live there? Is that
well, the ones that do go to Hawaii for Locomoco sex. So I don't know.
And once again, that's a security conference.
we also go to Colonel Con. You guys should go to that in Omaha. It's kind of a newer hacker con that I will be at. It should be fun. Trying to kind of take over the missing DerbyCon.
Sweet.
It's Nebraska. It's Nebraska. We don't get along with them very well, but I'm excited. They have free popcorn too, which is pretty sweet.
Oh, nice.
I mean,
wow. Sign me up. Yeah.
Right?
I actually did go to a conference one time where it was like, they had gourmet popcorns. Popcorn flavors you could it was pretty awesome. I don't know. It was pretty neat. Tasted good.
Sweet.
It sounds like a good thing to throw at presenters as they like screw up or whatever too, right?
Yeah, better than what is that, Smirnoff Ice or whatever to do it at DerbyCon.
Yeah.
Hey, so while we've got you on,
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about your experience with bug bounties, because I think if anybody I've seen, you've been pretty, like you and Jerry Gamblin have been pretty vocal about your feelings with bug bounty triage and standing up a bug bounty program. Your thoughts? I'd love to get your thoughts on bug bounty stuff.
How do I say this and not be a dick?
Hey, it's our podcast. You can say it and be a dick. That's fine.
You can just give your opinion.
I was in consulting forever, and found a lot of things over my time. Bug bounties have been around for a while. Nothing against the Bug Crowds, HackerOne, Synax, whomever you use, but frankly, the submit and wait thing drives me crazy. For the bug bounty that we run for Contrast, we try to respond within a day. It's just something that we take pride in. But when someone who spends a lot of time trying to find issues in systems, and we finally think we found something, and we submit it, and that vendor just fucking sits on it for weeks, months, in some cases over a year. I'm not sure why or how that's even fathomable for someone who's not only paying BugCrowd or HackerOne to host these things, but to keep people around, right? Like my whole thing is respond to people. Even if you can't verify or validate it quickly, respond to them and keep responding to them and interact with them, because you're driving away the good folks, the ones that are going to help you secure your systems. I've run into issues where I'll submit something. There was one I had found, a mass assignment, which was a Ruby thing, and still continues to be in some cases. And I submitted it. I had a video, I was able to make some changes. I was never able to get it to the point where I could take an account over, but I was sure that with certain encodings I could. And I submitted the videos and evidence and all that. Didn't hear anything for 3 months. 3 months.
3 months.
Wow.
3 months.
Did they send you even an initial, hey, we're investigating this?
No.
Nothing?
Nothing. And then the host of this program, I'm not going to give that away either, finally responded with, we'll reach out to them and see what's up. 5 months goes by, they finally respond and they ask some questions, what version? It was a mobile app, what version and all this stuff. And I said, it's a vulnerability in the API. What's the version of the mobile app going to tell you?
Right.
Wait. 8 months goes by and they finally get back and they're like, we can't reproduce it. I'm like, of course you can't reproduce it. It was fixed. Because after the 5 months, I tested it again and it wasn't working anymore. They made a change, they fixed it. So they couldn't reproduce it. That pisses someone off, right?
Yeah, it does, because you feel like you've been cheated.
My philosophy is, if you touch code, you pay out, period. Right?
Yeah.
If you touch code, you pay out.
When you say touch code, you mean make a fix.
If you make a fix,
or even a hardening,
or hardening, thing, or whatever. Yeah. And even if it's a kudos thing, right? If it's a low risk to your org or whatever else, give them the kudos or the points or whatever. Don't say I can't reproduce it. That's lazy. It was working. Here's the video evidence. It was working 5, 6, 8 months ago, right? So I get frustrated as a hunter. I know a guy in my team, Matt Austin. He spends pretty much every Thursday night, and he's one of those guys that he only submits criticals, right? Like RCEs and things like that. And he'll wait. I mean, he's sitting on one he's waited over a year. A critical RCE.
It seems a bit.
I get confused. I mean, I know people are busy. I know this industry is seriously in a shortage of talent, but if you stand up a bug bounty, it's a lot of work. And I think you've got to be ready and prepared for that, because you're going to get a lot of shit, which hopefully your bug crowds, your HackerOnes, your Synax will handle for you. But you're also going to get a lot of really good results. I mean, there's some amazing people. There's this one guy in Morocco that he just blows my mind with the bypasses that he's submitted to us.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like I would have never thought of that. I mean, he's submitting bypasses that are so low level, as far as like, oh well, this is using the this ODBC connector, and that connector handles these things this way, and I'm like, holy mother, things that I just would never dig into.
For those people, we of course have the private bug bounty program, but we had one person that's like sounds like similar to what you're talking about, and they kept finding authorization after authorization issues. We actually ended up just contracting them to just like go and look at just continue looking at the things they've been looking at and just like hammer away. And so yeah, like you have other steps you can take besides just a private bug bounty. Like you can actually contract people to do, if like they're really good at something, you know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, my whole thing is I want to keep people around. HackerOne, because they have like 300,000 hackers signed up. How many of those are actually engaged? Probably not even 20%, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that are probably the ones you want to keep around, that are spending the time. I mean, when it comes down to it, the amount of money you're paying out is pennies on the dollar to what it would cost you to hire some firm or try to hire these people that are signed up to these programs to just come do it full time, right? Like it's not even close. I mean, they're finding some just amazing things, and in a lot of cases they're not treated well.
Some of the things that we've seen come out of the bug bounty program, I guarantee you, even if we did contract 3 different companies to look through through our functionality, they wouldn't have like found it, just because sometimes it is absolute. I mean, people forget, like there is definitely, like with what we do, there's definitely systems and ways to maximize your effectiveness and to maximize the likelihood that you're going to find vulnerabilities and you're preventing them for sure. Like no question. What nobody wants to, well, I don't want to say nobody, but what I feel like isn't talked as much about is the fact that there absolutely is a special talent that once you've systemized everything, right? And you've got like all things being equal, like people are following the same processes, like same methodology. There is absolutely a human element to where it just takes that connection in your mind to chain things together and to sort of like find creative. And that's a creative thing. That's your flavor, if you want to say, on top of the systems that are in place to like, when I say systems, I mean, like, I'm very much a believer in making the process of reviews and dynamic assessments, whatever, like a system, sort of like a repeatable process. But yeah, then there's just those things where it's like, I could have hired 3-4 different contracting companies. It's a very low likelihood they would have actually found what this bug bounty researcher chained together. So
yeah, 100%.
That's the value, I think.
We run kind of an interesting bug bounty. So we actually have like an automated backend that spins up a Docker image running WebGoat that is running our RASP product on WebGoat. So it kind of makes it easier for the researcher to spin this up. They know where the vulnerability is, right? It's WebGoat. They know where XSS is. They know where SQL injection is. And our whole thing is, can you bypass the RASP protection? Because you know what? There's bypasses. I'm not going to sit here and say there aren't. There always will be. But we want to know about them to see how we can make a product better. And what we've noticed is there's really 2 kinds of researchers that we've seen. There's the ones that come in and they push the button on SQL map and let it run, because we can see all the results in our UI, right? Like, hey,
I'm sure it triggers tons of alerts.
Oh yeah. I mean, hundreds of thousands, right? And then there's the ones who, they come in and you can see some pretty crazy crafted exploits, and you can see as they go along how they start figuring out based on the exploits they're seeing how our product works, right? It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's pretty descriptive of the bug bounty guys in general, right? Is there's the ones that are, okay, we're using the tools and we're just doing fly, basically as quickly as we can. Is there anything that we can find here that we can spin for profit, and then they move on, right? There's not a, they don't dive in. And I don't feel like those ones are as, again, they're not going to find those fine-tuned vulnerabilities in the different bug bounties. I mean, you're going to have to deal with both types, but still.
Yeah.
We talk about in our course, you've got to get to know, like, so the researcher you're talking about, or researchers, they're taking either their process or something they saw that got accepted to another bug bounty program, and they're like automating it and making it, that's their system. That's their one little system they're putting together, is automating that and just trying it against all targets, right? Yeah. And then there's the researchers, what you're talking about, and this is the same thing we talk about in our course, which is like, you get to know the application. You get to know how it behaves. You get to know all the weird little edge cases there could be. Like, what are all the different ways that authorization occurs, and how do we identify people, and how's session handling, and all these little basic but fundamental and important bits. And then, like, what's the business logic? What's the business purpose? What are the ways what should you not be able to do? And you really get to know it and well, and then you can find those vulnerabilities. But yeah, the people you're talking about, that don't do that. There's
a different level there, and it's interesting. I don't know if HackerOne does it, but Bugcrowd has this thing now where, like, they can fulfill your yearly need to perform an assessment of an app, right? Like you would contract out with an AppSec security or a Denim Group or someone like that to come in and do, or a Seth Law, and now they have this service, and I'm curious how it works. Are they using the same sorts of researchers, and do they like say, hey, I know you're good at XSS, so I'm gonna you focus on that for this system and spend this amount of time on it. So I don't know. It's just an interesting model, I guess, for a bug bounty program to start offering that sort of level of assurance, if you will, because bug bounties are point and shoot, right, for the most part.
Yeah, so that's interesting because there's a couple of them that I'm involved with that they've started to so basically offer researchers a checklist of stuff for each app that needs to be checked. So this is what's going on behind the scenes. So they've got a list of, hey, most researchers log in and they're looking for cross-site scripting or request smuggling or whatever else.
Right.
And then they move on. But so they put together this checklist of, hey, for like authentication, has everything been checked? Have you tried to log in and brute force or whatever else, right? And they will actually pay based on, did you spend, a half hour, an hour of your time checking this off? It's not as, and then if you find anything, they'll still let you submit that bug for additional bug bounty money, right? And so it's kind of this guarantee that, all right, if I spend an hour looking at authorization issues with this application, I'm going to at least get paid a little bit, because I won't, I may not find something because there's no indications there, but at least there's some sort of coverage. So I think that's how they're going to do it.
As an organization that has to do yearly reviews for compliance reasons, it's enticing because the cost model is way cheaper. but I still don't have a feel for how much assurance. Like, I don't want to do it just for check the box, right? I want to do it to get some level of assurance.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting thing that at least I'm seeing with Bugcrowd. I don't know if the other ones do something similar or not.
Yeah. They do. Like, I know they do. I don't know how widely it's offered or which clients they actually provide that to. The question that I always had there is, again, you're running into the same issue of, okay, these researchers may be really good at finding SSRF, but they have no idea, anything on like how SSO or whatever else actually works. So I mean, it's always an experience factor, and hey, just because somebody found something this year doesn't mean they're going to find it the next year if you leave it there because of that model that they're using. So, but you could argue the same thing probably about most pen testing firms or others that are out there, depending on who the resource is that's actually doing the testing, right?
Yep.
But okay, so we've talked a little bit about bug bounties, and we were already at like 40 minutes, whatever, right? So let's talk about RASP, IAST, WAF. I know there is a fair amount of confusion in the community at large, right? Especially from kind of the researcher's perspective or offensive perspective on what they're actually dealing with and running into, right?
Sure.
WAF is by far the most mature. It's been around the longest as opposed to the other technologies. And what WAF is a web application firewall, but can you give us an explanation of IAST versus RASP, where that fits?
Yeah, so
general, yeah.
So IAST is I guess it's pretty well accepted now. Interactive application security testing. It's meant to basically take the place of or supplement your traditional SAST and DAST, your static and dynamic assessment tools. The great thing about what IAST is doing is it utilizes binary instrumentation, like a New Relic does, right? It uses instrumentation for performance, but our product in IAST uses the instrumentation for security reasons. And the great thing about it is it's in your app. It knows everything that's going on in your app, and it can see data coming in and data going out. And it can determine with that data flow if there's a vulnerability there. So it doesn't have to guess, right? Like your traditional SAST tools, you run like something like a Checkmarks or a Fortify. It has to make a lot of guesses. It puts together its abstract syntax trees, and maybe it will only go 5 levels or 10 levels or whatever the thing is set to, and it has to make some guesses because it's not following the actual data in the application when it's running. So the great thing about the IAST platform is it's very accurate, because we know exactly what's going on. We've seen the data come in that HTTP request, and now we see what data is going out. And if that data coming in is ending up in what we would call a sink, say a SQL sink, and it's someone that, sends in Ceph / or whatever, we can 100% say it hasn't been validated, it hasn't been touched, it's not being used in a parameterized query. This is vulnerable SQL injection. And the great thing about IAST is you don't even have to send attack data, right? It's just based on the data itself. So you can just send Ceph and we can tell you that you have a SQL injection vulnerability. So it's very accurate.
Is that the data is it because of both the data being clearly not validated if it's an email address field and it's like that, but then also like a stack trace being generated or something along those lines?
Yeah, exactly. So the high level of what happens, say we utilize like the get parameter from HTTP request within Java. That would be considered a vulnerable source, right? So we're getting tainted data because we know anything coming from the HTTP request is vulnerable, right? Or tainted, right? You can modify to whatever you want. So if I'm getting the name field in the get parameter request, now I can trace that. So the name is Ceph. I trace that through a bunch of what we call propagators. It may go through a bunch of different objects, methods, whatever, as we trace it all the way back to the SQL query, right? If none of those propagators or none of those methods or objects that it's being saved in or modified in or whatever else do any sort of validation, or we can tell that it's just doing a dynamic SQL query, we can tell with 100% certainty that that's vulnerable to SQL injection. We run into this all the time, specifically in cases where you can't parameterize something. Like if you're doing an order by, like an ascending or descending, like 100% of the time where I've seen clients say, "Hey, this is a false positive," I'm like, "No, watch this."
Yeah,
it's vulnerable because it's really hard to get your head around. So it's really intelligent as far as how it traces that data. Now, there are definitely times where there are validators that we don't know about. I mean, we try to make some intelligent guesses, like for cross-site scripting. Like if you're doing some level of validation, what we'll do in the UI is we're like, "Hey, this looks like a validator. Do you want to add it as one?" And then you won't see it again. But it's very accurate. You're not going to get 30,000 vulnerabilities in a scan because it's not scanning. It's just always on.
right.
You'll get 50, and more than likely 49 or 50 of them are real, right? I think the last number we have was like 2% false positive rate. which is pretty awesome. Is it perfect? No. I mean, it's going to miss things that SaaS probably gets, and it's going to miss something that DaaS probably gets. But what it does get is very accurate.
Yeah, well, and you hear people talk a lot about like 30,000 false positives, say, or even 10, whatever, 2,000, whatever. But what they maybe don't also mention is sometimes you're just you have like one function that's vulnerable, but that function's reused everywhere. And then, so then it looks like, my gosh, this has this class of vulnerability everywhere. But it's like, nah, if they made one line of code change, like for instance, let's say you have XSS everywhere on the site, but it might just be like, raw sort of output in the header that's included in every single HTML templated file. Well, then like, it's one like little bit of change and it fixes it everywhere. So yeah, like versus, having, like you said, 50, because why I bring that up is when you talk about like what you said, which is you have a source of tainted data, and then like it goes through different functions. You could like potentially say, okay, well, this one function's vulnerable, but I don't have to like then also say it's 3,000 other places because of this one function that it showed up.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, and it's hard. I mean, it's very language specific because it's running in your application, and it's very framework specific. The last I knew, our Java agent supported like 900 different frameworks. And that's just, it's barely touching the tip of what's
it's a drop in the bucket, right?
So it's can you imagine the CI/CD on every build for that, and the testing that's done. So it's interesting. So anyway, that's IaaS. I think it's very well understood. It's really making a move in the market.
I mean, it seems like a natural progression from a WAF, right? Something that sits in line but doesn't know the internals of an application. You switch to IaaS where it is in the application and can see everything. That makes a much bigger difference. I mean, I remember, oh crap, what was the initial WAF that was out there?
Mod security?
Not mod. The Imperva. Yeah. I remember Imperva tried to get around it by putting like a database proxy on the back end to identify SQL injection vulnerabilities, right? There was this weird like 2-agent install process that you had to do. You had the WAF on the front end and a database proxy on the back end that would watch the transaction and be like, oh, so the same thing that you're doing within contrast within the application itself, it was trying to do external, but it was always this huge like latency issue that they had, right? Because that's
the biggest concern with developers with WAF and RASP solutions. They're always like, is it going to slow things down?
Yeah.
Oh, so let's talk about performance. So IaaS is definitely a performance hog, because you can imagine what's going on here. It's instrumenting every single method in your app and every third party that you're pulling in. So IaaS today is meant more for your test type environment. I don't think you'd want to run it in prod. We do have some clients that will, they've got 500 instances of their web app running, and they'll rotate a few in just to get better coverage. Because that's the other thing that IaaS struggles with is coverage. So if that path isn't used, we don't see it.
Yeah.
So if you have terrible tests or regression tests or no tests at all, that makes it really hard to
that never happens. Everyone writes tests.
Oh yeah, everyone writes amazing tests. But the great thing about IaaS is it's helping solve our cybersecurity talent shortage. Because if I can have this tool integrated into a CI/CD that's always running, and I get direct feedback in my dev environment, and I can fix things as I go, I don't necessarily need a security expert to tell me if it's an issue or not, right? Like if we're pretty confident and real confident that it's accurate, and they have good guidance on what they need to do, they don't need us anymore, right? And that's what I'm hoping happens. But if you have a report that has 30,000 false positives, you're not going to give that to a developer and be like, hey, figure out which ones are real when there's like 7 of them. Right? Yeah. So that's where we have to come in and spend time, cycles, and frankly, money of the company to figure out which 7 of them are actionable, right? So that's IAST, and then there's RASP. So RASP is still kind of new, I guess. The term has been around for probably 5 years. It's something that it's runtime application self-protection. We have a lot of people in the.
I messed that acronym all up. Sorry. Runtime application self-protection. All right.
Yeah. It's a little different. There's a lot of folks that are trying to, I guess, fully replace their WAF with it, but it's not really there yet. It does things differently. So if you think about a WAF this way, it's a terrible analogy, but I try to come up with these all the time. But think if you go to the zoo and you go up to the monkey cage and they're selling bananas, and you can throw the bananas through the fence because they fit. Because they've allowed the bananas to get through, but maybe you brought your own apples and you throw those and they won't fit. It's kind of like what a WAF is doing. It's looking at the size, shape, what it looks like as it's coming in, and it says yes or no, right? But what if I want to allow the apple, right? Now I have to go tune this fence, this WAF, to allow the apple and the banana in. Or maybe I want to go back and not allow the apples anymore, right? So I have to go back and tune it. And the thing is how do I know that the monkey actually likes the apple, right? I don't. So it's a weird thing that we've used. We tried to solve this issue back in the day, like 2002, right? Was mod security, because we knew firewalls, we knew network security, but hey, web apps, we always open port 80 and 443 and allow everything in. So let's create a firewall to fix our problem, because that's what we did for network security. But really, it doesn't give you any insight into anything other than the traffic that's coming to your app. It doesn't give you anything from an actionable standpoint, right? Like if I see something coming in and I'm like, oh, that looks like CVE XYZ, I'm going to block it. How do you know your app's even vulnerable or even using that component, right? You don't. Do you care? Obviously not. So WAF is just that. On the edge, block it, ignore it, or have like alert fatigue, right? Which we run into a lot. And it's always being tuned. We had a customer call the other day and they sent me this spreadsheet, and it was like, hey, how does your RASP product protect all of these things? And it's just all of the different patches that they've applied to their WAF over time. Like for CVE this and CVE that. And I'm like, all right, let's back up and talk about how RASP works. So how RASP is different is it uses the same sort of binary instrumentation that we use in IAST, and it follows the data. So we can be like, oh, it's coming in as this get parameter, and at this point we run like some detection mechanisms. Does it look like something is an attack? Because in RASP you want to see and block attacks, so you have to have some regular expressions and some other things that we're doing internally, and everyone kind of handles RASP differently to determine, yeah, that looks like a SQL injection. So then we can follow it, and if it ends up in a SQL sync, we can block it, right? And say, hey, that looked like an attack. So now there's actionable items there, right? If we're getting tainted data in, it's not being validated, and it's ending up in a SQL sync, that's vulnerable. You can now have your developers fix it. Or if you know about it and you're comfortable with it being blocked, you can defer remediation, right? We have a lot of customers that use RASP for that. It's like, oh, I have this 20-year-old Java app running on Java 6. I know it's vulnerable to SQL injection and command injection or whatever else all over the place. I don't have anyone to fix it. I'm just going to put my RASP here and be confident and comfortable that it's going to help protect, actual attacks. So that's the difference, right? Like in a WAF, if it saw SQL injection, it would block it. In a RASP, if I see SQL injection and it goes out in an XSS sync, I don't care. It's never going to execute. In what we do, we call that a probe, because you might still want to know that someone's trying to do something, but I don't have to, there's no action to take. There's no developer I need to talk to, or someone I need to wake up in the middle of the night because, I'm getting actively attacked from a SQL injection perspective.
So are you seeing the same sort of performance hits that you do with IAST?
So it doesn't do full binary instrumentation because it doesn't need to.
Okay.
So
it's a very kind of limited set of, I'm instrumenting the dangerous, like the tainted stuff as it's coming in, and then probably the sinks as they go out.
Yeah, and it uses some of the mechanisms that a WAF had traditionally used, but more in depth as far as like scoring. Like, so as soon as we're confident in something being an attack, we can really stop tracing it till the very end at that point and determine it's actually going out in that vulnerable sink. So there's a lot of performance gains that we can get there. We can put it in aggressive mode, which acts, I guess, more like a WAF and can block things sooner if clients are fine with that. If it's a high risk application and they're okay with that, they can kind of put it in that sort of different mode. But there's definitely a performance impact. It just, imagine how difficult it is, right? Like, people write apps different. Some of them are written very eloquently and do things how you would expect, but most of them don't. They're written poorly. They have massive payloads, like thousands and thousands of JSON parameters coming in one request, right? Like, people do that. Well, guess what? People do that, and that does definitely cause an impact because now we have to process every single one of those inputs, right? But it's more accurate than way more accurate than a WAF would be, which doesn't create the same alert fatigue. It gives you actionable items because for a fact that it's actually ending up in some vulnerable sink, if you will, where it would actually execute. Versus the WAF, you have no idea. We lost Kenny.
That's okay. We can keep talking. It looked like his internet was slow. He kept freezing there, so that's fine. No
worries.
There he is. He's back now.
So yeah, RASP is great. It's interesting. Sorry. You're starting to see things now where FSMA and PCI and some of the NIST, like 853, are starting to add IAST and RASP in them. So they're finally coming to the forefront. Gartner is finally splitting out RASP from WAF. Which it's about time that they did that because they are different. They do different things. They protect you from different stuff. Like the WAF is very good at detecting and blocking DDoS type attacks. RASP, not so much yet. Could it? Sure. It could be built into it, but that hasn't really been the focus. It kind of reminds me of the early days of EDR, where we have our virus protection that's doing some signature-based stuff local on our machines. And now we have this EDR that can do some more in-depth detection and response type of stuff. And for a while, we did them both, right? I kind of feel that's where we're at right now with WAF and RASP, where WAF is like 100% regular expression detection-based, looking for certain ways of doing SQL injection, things like that. You're always updating your regular expression definitions and all of that. And then you have the RASP on the back end that doesn't have to necessarily do that. Like, we had like a WebLogic CVE come out the other day. It was an RCE. There was no change. Like, it's the same vulnerable gadget all over the place. They were just using it, right? So the RASP already knew about it and protected it and blocked it. You look at things like Equifax, which I think you guys talked about this last time, right? With the PLA and whatever else.
Yeah.
But there's a gap, right? Like, so Struts comes out, there's a CVE release, but how long does it take for that CVE to get released, right? Quite a while. So there's a gap in coverage in your WAF. And the RASP helps solve that too, right? Because the RASP doesn't have to necessarily be updated to detect that vulnerable component within that Struts RCE, CVE, if you will. So it helps with the gaps as well, where you can now go patch your WAF after the patch comes out, if you will.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we're pushing further into that, like, bug or exploit lifecycle, which is, I mean, especially as a large organization, that's what you see is that proof of concept gets released, and all the script kiddies or whoever else goes out and they use that, and then it takes a week for the WAF vendors to get that together, or whoever else to actually patch something, and then you've got the whole patching cycle after that. Like, I mean, that's part of the reason we still run into a lot of those vulnerabilities, 2 months down the road or a year down the road, is because of the difficulty of actually patching that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I mean, it seems like there's different pieces, right? And they kind of make sense between the WAF, the RASP, the IAST behind the scenes, and the synergies. I don't know, like, lack of a better term, like how they complement each other as far as, hey, what is it that you're using?
I mean, I'd love to be able to tell people just go use them all, but frankly, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And you're going to use whatever works best in your organization. I think the IAST and RASP platforms work a whole lot better in this DevOps mindset, and teams that are working in 1 and 2 week sprints, very automated. They don't want interruptions. They don't want you to come in and do, go push a button and run your SAST and DAST tools and then give them a report, right? Like they want to know about something like immediately, like, hey, I've got my sprint work, I've got my ticket, I'm working on this one little feature, I make my changes, I submit it to CI, and right away I get 2 vulnerabilities that I just added to the system that I can address right now, right then in my sprint. That's what they want. That's what I want. Right? Like, I want them to build secure code faster, and it's part of their process. With our older tools and the older way of doing things, we can't do it that way. And so we have these reports, we put some tickets in Jira, they get groomed, they get put on the backlog, and they sit there, right? And we need to get away from that. So, hoping we can get there with IAST and RASP, because, there may be some things that you introduce that you want to defer remediation, and you'll be able to do that if we keep talking shift left, but it's more like extend both ways, if you will, right? Like, extend throughout the life cycle, because there's going to be things that you find and want to protect and, find early. I need to defer the remediation or whatever else. I mean, we have some massive clients, you can imagine, with thousands of applications. There's absolutely no way for them to prioritize some of their vulnerabilities. So they have to rely on some other controls to help them defer some of the remediation of those, right? Same thing with, like, third-party libs. You know how hard it is to update those,
Yeah. We run into that all over, right? Like, you've got the large organizations, but you even have small startups that basically just don't have the resources to go out and spend, if I drop them a report with 20 findings on it, I've got to be very careful about what I call out as high or critical risk, because of the time that's going to put onto their dev team when they're trying to, basically survive and sell their product, right? It's this really fine line that the organizations have to walk. And I mean, if security's not paying attention, or AppSec or ProdSec's not paying attention to it either, it's going to be the developers will stop responding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys saw the React one, right? With all the library dependencies. It was like 1,500 or something ridiculous. Yeah. I mean,
well, initially it came out and he did it wrong. It was like 1 million, but 1,500 is still ridiculous.
It's still ridiculous, right? But that's another great thing about IAST and RASP is we don't care what you're using. It's still going to trace your requests through that third-party library, right? So it does help you determine, like, hey, am I actually using the vulnerable piece of that library? Which is, kind of a game changer as far as, do I need to really update this component right now? Am I vulnerable to it? Because that's always been a question. How many years as a consultant, and you'd run your NPM audit or whatever. It's like, oh, you're out of date on these 10 libs, and here's the 10 CVEs that are associated with them. Well, how do you know you're actually using the vulnerable piece or the vulnerable component? You don't.
No.
And that was always the argument. Well, am I using the vulnerable thing? I'm like, I don't know. You know?
Yeah.
So, Kenny, I see you again. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Connection issues.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate actually talking it through, and I'm sure some of the listeners will as well, because that's always it. Like everything gets lumped together. Everybody's like, oh, I asked RASP, and actually knowing where those lines delineate will help people actually figure out which product is, or what technology they should be looking at for their organization. Yeah, I mean, I know I've been involved in multiple projects for clients on different aspects of that, but I don't know how widely known it is in the industry, just in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to work very well in the waterfall-esque approach, where you have, because if there's an update that needs to be made to the agent that's living in the code, that requires a system restart, right? But in the DevOps world, that's fine because they're continually rebuilding and starting things up anew and building new containers and doing all that fun stuff. So it's definitely looking more forward into the more DevOps world than, it's just really hard. Some of the bigger organizations that may have like, oh, well, we have a faction in China and they respond to us like once every 3 months. And they're the ones that need to do the server restarts and things like that. It makes it really hard to really do IASP and RASP well in that sort of organization.
Yeah, which makes sense. Well, so I mean, I know you guys deal with a lot of large companies. Are you seeing pretty good penetration with startups then? Silicon Valley companies trying to implement RASP and IASP? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the board. So yes, the great thing is, there's actually quite a few organizations like that, the startups that have a single application that just use our free Contrast TV, it's called. Yeah. It's full featured, it's free, you can use it on one app, right? And we actually have quite a few organizations that do that, and that's fine. It's kind of what it's there for. And as they grow and whatever else, then they might come talk to us further for actual other licenses. But I used CE when I first started here to find vulnerability in Jira, and got paid a bug bounty for it. It was pretty awesome, actually. Nice. Like, I just want to see how this works, and see what I can do with it. And sure enough, there was a kind of like a controversial-ish type issue in the way that Jira handles stuff. So,
cool. Nice. Well, good. Dave, thanks for your time. We've been going for a good hour and 10. I know that Ken's got a hard stop here.
I got to leave in 2 minutes.
As far as conferences or where people can find you, obviously at Golf Hacker Dave on Twitter. But where else are you going to be?
There's a small chance I'll be at Snowfrock. I haven't decided yet. That's coming up really soon. It's like March 5th. Really good one-day con in Denver. It's like their local OWASP chapter. Really good speaker lineup. And then KernelCon is, I think it's like the 25th through 28th of March in Omaha. Highly recommend it. Some really good talks on the lineup there. I know a few that are speaking there for sure. And then I'm speaking at InfoSec World, which is the week after that, down in Orlando at Disney World. So I'm excited about that, and waiting on a shitload more potential presentations. I'm hoping for Dublin, since we have an office in Belfast. You guys gonna make it over to Dublin too, hopefully.
That's what we're hoping. So
fingers crossed.
So that's like my next month. It'll be busy, but I'm excited to kind of get out of the winter for a bit.
Yeah, we all are. Well, good. Appreciate it, Dave. We'll have you back on sometime soon. All right. I feel like there's always stuff to talk about. This goes by so
Sorry
quickly.
for making us go late.
Yeah, but it's fine, Ken. Find us online.
At least you still have all your teeth, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the thing. So
sweet. All right.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody. We'll see everybody
See ya.
online.
All right. Bye.